Mingo Point sunsets and oyster roasts have been a tradition on Kiawah Island for decades. Understanding that oyster shells are a valuable natural resource, the Kiawah Island Golf Resort has been recycling oyster shells through the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. After each oyster roast, resort staff collect the shells. The Department of Natural Resources brings these shells to their facility, after which they're used to build living shorelines.
Nick Playstead here. I'm a wildlife biologist for the SCORE program, which stands for South Carolina Oyster Recycling Enhancement Program. We are a part of the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. Long story short, what we do is we take oyster shell and we put it back out in the marshes to rebuild oyster habitat. The three main reasons that we build these oyster beds are water filtration, erosion mitigation, and most importantly, habitat. So a little bit more about each of those. When it comes to water filtration, one adult oyster can filter 2.5 gallons of water per hour. So when you multiply that by 24 hours in a day, you get about 50 gallons of water per day from just one adult oyster. Now, if you extrapolate that by the thousands of oysters that you have on an oyster bed, that's excellent for water filtration and water quality. The second reason I mentioned erosion mitigation. These oyster beds actually serve as a natural breakwater. Imagine a boat going by and kicking up a wake. As that wake comes into shore, it's going to hit that shoreline and it's going to start to erode all that sediment. When you have an oyster reef there, that same wake comes in and it will hit that oyster bed and it will dissipate all that wave energy. So instead of eroding that bank, you actually get the deposition of sediment, which will start to build up that shoreline, which we can come back in later and we can plant Spartina grass in where that pluff mud starts to accrue. So this is a great tool in the toolkit when it comes to mitigating erosion, which is a big problem here, on the east coast of America with sea level rise. And then the third reason, which is the biggest one, is habitat. So the way this works, oysters start off their life cycle and they're actually swimming around in the water column and they're looking for something to attach to. And we call that substrate. And they can attach to just about anything, but ideally they like to attach to shell. That oyster shell has calcium carbonate in it, and that calcium carbonate is kind of a chemical signal that when it leaches out into the water, it's telling those larval oysters, hey, come settle here. And that oyster reef's gonna have lots of little nooks and crannies, lots of little cracks and crevices. We call those interstitial spaces. In all those interstitial spaces, you get a lot of little invertebrates that like to live in there. Lots of little crabs, lots of little worms. That's going to attract bigger vertebrates that want to feed on them. That's going to attract even bigger predators from that, and then it starts to cascade all the way up the food web. And the next thing you know, you've got an entire ecosystem that's congregating around these oyster beds for feeding purposes.
Nearly a year has passed since we installed the living shoreline, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's recruiting oysters, it's building that healthy oyster reef habitat, and it's also accreting sediment. So the pluff mud is gaining elevation almost 1.5 feet, which is going to allow us to plant Spartina alterniflora in the upland portion of the living shoreline to help stabilize the existing pluff mud, expand the marsh, and really build a healthy ecosystem of the oyster reef and Spartina. In December, we collected the seeds from the Spartina growing at Mingo Point. We wanted to collect these specific seeds because they would be better adapted to the site conditions found where the living shoreline was installed. We've already seen the existing Spartina begin to expand through its root systems, its rhizomes, but what we're going to do is interplant it with Spartina that we've been growing to help speed up the process of shoreline stabilization. This will just help create a healthier marsh a little bit quicker than what would happen naturally.
To wrap all that up, that's really what we like to see in a living shoreline. That healthy oyster bed in the front, accruing pluff mud behind it, with that Spartina grass growing behind it, because then we have really a rich biodiversity that will frequent that area.
The Conservancy takes a watershed-based approach to land preservation and restoration. We know that wildlife and water move throughout the sea islands, so it's really important for us to use nature-based solutions like this living shoreline to help protect and restore areas on Kiawah, Seabrook, and Johns Island. If you'd like to learn more about our mission, please visit our website, kiawahconservancy.org, and find more about the work that we do in the Kiawah River watershed.